You're listening to the Medical School HQ podcast, online at medicalschoolhq.net. Session number 11. Hello, and welcome back to another excellent session here at the Medical School HQ podcast. I am your host, Ryan Gray, and we are the podcast about medical school. From the pre-med process through residency, we hope to take your knowledge of becoming a physician to the next level. Today, I have another excellent interview for you. Some of you may have read our post at medicalschoolhq.net about the 55-year-old third-year medical student. I have Kate today in our interview, and she goes a little bit more in depth about her process and her path to becoming a physician. She started out in the world of nursing, and along the way, decided to go back to medical school. A lot of what we talked about, you might want to look up later. I'll have everything in the show notes at medicalschoolhq.net/session 11, so you can go there after you listen and check out all the links to everything. Kate begins by telling us where she is on her path to becoming a physician.
All right. Well, currently I'm a third-year student at WVSOM, which is Osteopathic Medical School, and I'm doing, so I'm on rotations, and our school has a statewide campus, so it has a variety of different locations, and I'm in a rural site so that I can do the majority of my rotations at a rural location, because that's my interest is rural family practice.
And why is that?
Why is that? Oh, geez. Well, partly I think probably because I grew up on 8 acres out in the woods, lived in rural locations a lot of my life, and so I want to practice where I'd like to live, which is somewhere rural. And before going to medical school, I was a nurse midwife and worked at a National Health Service Corps site for my first job, which was very rural Tennessee. Really fell in love with rural medicine at the time. It's you're more, I guess, a big fish in a little pond, but you really have an opportunity to impact the community that you're living in a lot of ways beyond just the patients that you're seeing, and that really appeals to me.
So you just mentioned that you had a job before medical school, and
yes,
you are a non-traditional medical student. Tell everybody that's listening how old you are.
I'm 56. I just turned 56.
Wow, happy birthday.
Thank you.
So you're a 56-year-old third-year medical student.
That's exactly right.
Okay. So
yes, I usually preface that by telling people I'm a glutton for punishment.
And I find that amazing. I think when I was talking to Rich, the guy from oldpremeds.org, he was talking about an article from Syracuse's medical school from upstate about a 63-year-old, I believe, first-year student that they had accepted.
First-year student. Oh, my God.
Yeah, so there are more gluttons out there.
I feel for him or her.
So let's go back to your high school and undergrad years.
Okay.
Were you prior pre-med?
Yes, I was.
And what happened?
What happened? Well, I'd say a number of things happened. I decided that I wanted to be a doctor when I was 10, and I never changed my mind until midway through college. So I was a biology pre-med major, and I picked the college I did because I heard that folks from there got into University of Maryland Med School, which was the one I wanted to go to, before grads from any other colleges. So, I mean, it was really targeted. So a couple things happened. One was that I worked during the summer at University of Maryland for my uncle, who was a research hematologist. And so I had a nice lab job, and I was interacting with some of the medical students in the hospital, and also I was in the hospital and seeing the roles a bit. And a couple things stood out to me. One was, at that time, it was a very adversarial program, in that, a very competitive program, in that they graded on a curve, and whoever had the lowest grade in the class, even if it was like an 85, failed. And so the students tended to sabotage one another because they were like ripping required articles out of the bound journals in the library so nobody else could get hold of them, that sort of thing. I thought, well, this is just a toxic environment. This is horrible. So that was not, the medical school began to look less attractive to me, partly because of that. The other thing is I was in and out of the hospital, and what I saw was the doctors come in, read the chart, look at the labs, write some orders and leave. They didn't seem to be doing anything. It was very short-term, medical management, and the nurses were actually getting in there and, turning to patients and changing dressings and doing hands-on things where you could see the result of your actions right away. And that appealed to me. I think I was sick of school and I wanted to be doing something practical where I would be working right away. So the thought of 4 more years of school and 3 years of residency, it was very overwhelming to me. I thought, I think actually I'd rather be doing what the nurses are doing and get in there and be doing it sooner. So I transferred after my junior year of college. I transferred into the junior year of a nursing program. So I ended up getting a BSN 5 years after I started school.
Okay. So it was a combination of a toxic environment and a desire for some instant gratification with what you were doing. Right.
Some hands-on instant gratification, see the result of your actions kind of thing. And probably I was thinking about raising kids too, and at the time I wasn't sure how I could do that and spend much time with children with medical school and all that. I didn't know anybody who had done that, so I was thinking it was just, postpone having children until you were much older. And so I would say that factored in there a lot. But frankly, I didn't know much about the whole process. I didn't realize that I would probably be applying to a bunch of different medical schools. I didn't realize that it was possible to have a family and do medical school. So I would say I pretty much lacked a lot of research into the whole thing to begin with when I made my decision. But in fact, nursing did suit me very well for many years, and I do enjoy that, seeing the results of what you did with your hands right away.
Okay, so you enjoyed nursing.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that itch come back to go back into medicine, go back into the physician side of the house and go to medical school?
Well, obviously it was fairly gradual because look at my age. It wasn't like I dithered for 30 years. I was very much, doing my nursing thing. I was an ICU nurse for 13 years, which is a lot longer than one should probably be an ICU nurse because it's really stressful. And then I switched gears and went to nurse midwifery school, so that was a huge switch, and practiced as a nurse midwife and then started teaching nursing. And I would say it was while I was teaching nursing that things began to change. I was very involved in the public health community in my town. I was working one day a week at a free health clinic. I did that for 5 years. And I was teaching community health nursing. And so I placed my students into community health agencies all over the city and was visiting them there, observing them. I really kind of got a big picture of all these different avenues of public health. and the unmet need for primary care in the country really jumps out at you if you're at all involved in public health. I was involved in a couple of projects that were going on, a pilot project in Virginia that was looking at alternatives to meet the need for prenatal and maternity care in some communities where the hospitals had closed their units. And we had a very successful pilot project group, mainly because of the leadership of some physicians that were involved in that group. And so I began to see that physicians could really be a huge instrument for change and for effective organization around a public health problem, and that without that physician, it just didn't go forward nearly as fast. I had some attempts of things that I was trying to do in some communities of need that just took years and years, and then I worked with this project, and when you had the doc working with you, it just opened up a lot of doors. So that's really when I began thinking about being a physician myself, and I knew I wanted to get more involved in family practice, in taking care of the whole family and not just the woman, which was, my area prior to that. And I don't think I would have been satisfied with becoming a family nurse practitioner, because when you work as a nurse practitioner for many years, you begin to, I think, really get frustrated with taking care of only the common medical problems. You're aware that you've got a very encyclopedic knowledge of a lot of things, but it's not detailed enough anywhere. It's like a mile wide and only 6 inches deep. I just really wanted to know more, and wanted to have that background of knowledge if I was going to go into taking care of the whole family. So part of it was for practice, and part of it was for being involved in public health and being able to be an effective change agent.
Okay. Those are all great reasons.
A long answer. Sorry.
A great answer. So how old were you at this point?
50.
Okay.
I was 50 when I decided to go back to medical school.
Okay, 50 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Family?
At that point, my daughter had finished college, so my youngest. So
okay.
Yeah, I have 2 kids, but they were both out of school at that point.
Okay, grown and out of the house and
yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
taking care of themselves.
Right.
Where did you start to begin researching what it would take to go back and get accepted into medical school?
I Googled old pre-medical students.
And I'm sure
and the first
OPM.
thing that popped up was the OPM website, the old pre-meds website. And so I started reading some articles on there. Truthfully, that was the very first thing I found. And so the first thing I learned was that I needed to do my what prerequisites I needed, and that I needed to take the MCAT. And I had some of them. I'd only had 1 semester of organic chem and 1 of physics, so I think I needed to retake those. And so my way of thinking, since I had taken biology and chemistry in 1975 and both of them in 1975, that I really probably ought to do that over again as well. So I started looking for a place to take inorganic chemistry, since I figured, okay, it's going to be 2 years, 1 year for inorganic and 1 for organic, so let's start with inorganic. That's the first thing. That was my first step, was to try to register for a course in chemistry.
Okay. Did you reach out, besides Google and the website, the oldpremeds.org website, did you reach out to any pre-med advisors?
No, I really wasn't aware of the existence of pre-med advisors. What I did do, though, interestingly, is talk to my my family physicians, because it's a large family practice that used to be part of a residency program. And so I knew they had quite a bit of information on, medical education. And I had been speaking with them for some years about a outreach prenatal project that I wanted them to back me up for. That they were very supportive. So I talked to those guys first and said, I'm thinking about medical school. What can you tell me? What are your suggestions? So I would say most of the advice I got was probably from my own doctor, who was actually very encouraging.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And I encourage a lot of people, especially new people looking for shadowing opportunities, to go reach out to their doctor or maybe their parents' doctors.
Yeah, I think that's a step number one. Yes, because you already have some relationship with them.
Yep. Okay. So you reach out for a little bit of help. You start gathering some information. And let's talk about your post-bac program. I think when some initial dialogue that we had, you were trying to build your own post-bac program, but had some difficulties with that, or why did you go the route of a structured post-bac?
Well, I went to the main university in my city to try to sign up for chemistry, and I registered as a non-curricular student. And then you sign up for classes after the regular students who are enrolled in a major at the university. Well, by that time, there were no openings in chemistry. And you can go the first day of class and try to get added, which I did, but, I was behind the nursing majors and the bio majors and the chem majors. That's a hot ticket course, and I simply couldn't get in. So one semester went by, and the next semester, the same thing happened, and I also tried to get a chemistry class at every college in my city or in a reasonable driving distance, and I couldn't get into any chemistry class. Now, since then, I've heard the strategy of actually applying to the school as if you were going to do a second undergrad, and you don't have to complete that, but just being enrolled as a regular student, then you would be able to get into classes. I didn't think about that at the time, and so I was just frustrated. I'm like, I just simply can't get the classes I need. So I looked online. There's the AAMC website that tells you where the post-bac programs are, and looked at the ones in my state and applied to 2 of them.
Okay.
I also thought it was appealing. One of them lets you finish within 1 year. So I thought, okay, I can get all my classes in and be ready to apply.
Okay. When you're doing this, I'm assuming from the sounds of it that you stopped working full-time?
Only when I started the post-bac program. That's when I stopped working.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Was that scary?
Oh, yeah. Well, for somebody like myself somewhat later in life who's probably been in debt for a while and worked hard to get out of debt, I was, I had no debt. I was in a good financial situation, and I had to quit my job and move, actually, to go to the program that I went to. And so I had to figure out, what am I going to live on for a year while I'm doing this? And it's very intensive. I thought I would be able to do a little bit, like teach classes or something, and work part-time. And in fact, I was not able to work at all and be able to put the concentration I needed to into that program. So I borrowed money from a home equity loan. That's what I did. I took money out, and that's what I lived on for a year to do the post-bac program, and what paid for whatever of my tuition wasn't covered by the federal loan that I took. So, yeah, very scary.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure many people, and post-bac programs are becoming more and more popular. There's 140 of them now listed on the AAMC website.
Right.
And so I think many career changers like yourself, that's one of the big obstacles that they face, is they have a steady job and they have to walk away from it to pursue their passion of medicine. And it's encouraging, and it's very courageous that you're able to do that, and obviously successfully do that, because now you're in medical school. So, well,
it helps that I had an asset. I thought I was going to be able to sell my house and clear that debt, but that's when the housing market fell apart. It was right after I got the second mortgage on my house there. So yeah, I still haven't sold that house, but but in the global scheme of things, medical school itself is so expensive that the expense for a post-bac program and for that year is really probably the smallest expense towards the whole big goal that you're going to have. And when you realize I'm going to be borrowing scads of money anyway for medical school, what's important is that you're able to clear enough time to do well, because if you don't do well in your post-bac classes, you're not going to get into medical school. So you just have to, do whatever it takes to get those good grades during that program.
Definitely.
And for me, that was quitting. So.
Yeah. Okay. While we're on money,
mm-hmm.
Did you look into scholarships or the national health scholarships for medical school?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In fact, that was my plan. I hoped for securing a National Health Service Corps scholarship.
Okay.
That's in fact how I went to midwifery school, and then I did 2-year, at a payback site from that, and so that was my hope for medical school. So I applied every year, and I have not gotten a National Health Corps scholarship. My understanding, I actually talked to some officials from there, and one of the things they look at is if you're from a disadvantaged background, and if you get a federal scholarship to disadvantaged students, that puts you in the highest category for getting the scholarships. Okay, I'm not in that category, and the majority of the scholarships that were given out were within that category. So that's something to think about. So I have Plan B, which is to do a loan repayment after I get out, which is less competitive, I guess. I'm far more likely to get that.
Okay.
Because I am planning to practice in an underserved area anyway. So.
Okay, and what's that? What's the loan repayment program? Who's that
through? The loan
through?
repayment program, that is also. There's the National Health Service Corps loan repayment, which pays $50,000 of your loan for every year that you spend in the underserved area. You have to secure the job in the area at a qualified site, and then you apply for loan repayment. There are also some state programs which generally pay between $25,000 and $30,000 a year in loan repayments. So there are some different options out there.
Okay, good. I'm glad you're looking into that. I don't think enough people look into those programs that are available.
Yeah. My preceptor for my first rotation this year is doing his loan repayment through the National Health Service Corps. As I said, I'm practicing in a rural site in West Virginia, so
okay.
So his clinic qualifies for that.
Okay. So you're in your post-bac program, and you take the MCAT at some point in that program.
Right.
And you're starting to gather all your materials for applying to medical school.
Right.
What was involved in your decision-making when you chose what schools you were applying to?
That's a great question. I initially picked 6 schools, and then the director at my post-bac program told me that wasn't enough schools to apply to, that I need to find 5 or 6 more to apply to, and suggested I expand my criteria a little bit. I knew I wanted to do primary care, and specifically rural primary care. So I was looking at schools that had some emphasis in that area. And I also have an interest in global medical outreach. And so, for example, I looked at Albert Einstein Medical School at Yeshiva University because they've got a global health center. I looked at Tulane for the same reason, because of their global medicine. The other schools that I picked were schools that had a focus on rural primary care. I also looked geographically because my family is a huge support system for me. Both my kids, my siblings, my parents, and they're all, in the Maryland, Virginia area. So I was looking for some place that was not too far remote from there. So I tended to stay on the East Coast, because why put yourself in the most stressful situation you're ever going to be in your life and move yourself away from your support system? That didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So tried to stay somewhat close to there. So those were the main things I was looking at. I specifically picked osteopathic medical schools because I was there's an element of hands-on emphasis in osteopathic medicine, which appealed to me. As you remember, that's kind of why I went to nursing instead of medicine, and so that sort of preserves my approach, I guess, to patients. I like the perspective, I guess, the philosophy of osteopathic medicine, and some of the main schools that emphasize rural primary care are, in fact, DO schools. So not all of them, but many of them. So I ended up picking 6 osteopathic and 6 MD schools to apply to.
Okay. When you sit there and you click submit on your application, what's going through your head?
Oh, geez. Well, I would say mainly a profound sense of relief that I finally finished the application, because it's rather laborious, as you probably remember. It's very long. But I think the other thing is you're immediately wondering when you're going to hear something. It's it's not realistic to expect instant feedback, but you end up checking every day and thinking, okay, when's somebody going to say something? Am I going to get a secondary? I didn't realize at the time that most schools send out a secondary application. So, so that was kind of a pleasant surprise that I kept getting these secondaries really quickly. But of course, then it's the whole waiting game for whether you're going to be asked to interview. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I applied through the AMCAS application, which is the main application for allopathic medical schools, it was the first year that it was an electronic application, and it was a mess.
Dear.
Yeah, so I don't want to relive those days.
They worked the kinks out before I got there, I think.
Hopefully, yeah. It was many days of repeating information, inputting information, because it would just delete all your stuff. It was fun. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you applied to 11, 12 schools, something like that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How many interviews did you get?
How many interviews did I get? Let me think. 6.
Wow. Outstanding. And a mix of MD and DO schools?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. That's a strong application.
Thank you.
What, during your interview trail, obviously you're the one sticking out. And that's not to say that you look funny, but
it's definitely not the same application as everybody else. That's
correct.
For sure.
And
yes.
How do you think that affected both yourself on the interview trail and the people that were interviewing you?
I think that actually I may have gotten some of the interviews from people who were partly because they were like, who in the world is this?
I want to meet this crazy person.
That's right. What in the world's going on with her? So, I think it's always good if your application can raise some questions so they want to get you in to find out more. I actually think that's a workable strategy, particularly for non-trads. But I would say for myself, I had kind of gotten over my apprehension about the fact that I was an older applicant. I was real nervous about that to begin with, but the director at my post-bac program talked to me about that some and really convinced me of what I believe to be true, which is that you have a much richer narrative to bring to the interview, and because you've had the opportunity to do things, and so there's just a great deal that you can talk about. So I think on the whole, it gave me some really strong things to talk about in the interviews. I think my age worked against me. There was one particular interview where I felt that the three representatives from the school who talked to me all had a very positive image, but I got the feeling that the admission committee had a very negative view on my age. And I say that because I saw a copy of my application, and they had my birth date circled on their Xerox copy with 52 and 3 exclamation points after it. So I rather think somebody had some concerns about my age at that particular school. But the interviews actually went very well at that school, and so I think it kind of got past that initial impression of, what in the world is going on here.
Okay. Very. I find that fascinating. And I think it is, and I brought this up, or one of my other interviews brought it up on a previous podcast, that it is a little bit different for the interviewer to try to change their kind of questioning and
right.
what they're trying to extrapolate from the person that's interviewing, because it's not the 22-year-old fresh out of or currently in undergraduate school that has pretty much the same path as everybody else.
Right.
So
yeah.
I'm sure they enjoy talking to people like yourself a little bit more, because there's a little more adventure behind the story.
It's funny because I got asked questions that had to do with my teaching experience in nursing, teaching in nursing schools, and I almost got educator to educator type questions. This is sort of what our teaching strategy is, and what do you think about that? And what sort of experiences do you have there? So that was a little different. I think there was perhaps a more collegial footing from some of the interviewers.
Good. On your path to getting into medical school, what was, and maybe in medical school, what has been your biggest obstacle that you've had to overcome?
God, there's so many. It's difficult to say. I think that in the path to getting to medical school and getting actually to the point of applying to medical school, the biggest obstacle was myself talking myself out of it. I talked myself out of it when I was a pre-med major in college, and for some good reasons, and that was not a terrible decision at the time. But when you approach this later in life, it's very easy to tell yourself, there's no way I have a chance, or what if I commit all these resources, quitting my job, putting myself in debt, giving up a year of my life to do the questions, to do the prerequisites. What if this is just a pipe dream? So you can really talk yourself out of trying. And in fact, your chances are really good. If you do the prereqs and do really well in your classes and get a decent score in the MCAT, your age is really not a huge barrier to getting in. That might have been the case, 15 or 20 years ago, but that really isn't the case now. So I think it's important not to talk yourself out of trying. So maintaining that forward momentum, and particularly when you run into an obstacle, you're not successful. Maybe somebody rejects your application, or you don't get an interview at the school you wanted to get an interview at. To maintain that forward momentum is probably the the hardest thing, and you've got to have a reserve of energy to just keep pushing.
That's great advice. I think there's a ton of great information that you shared today. I want to end with just asking what your future plans are. I know you talked a little bit about it with the National Health Service Corps, but what do you picture your ideal practicing situation is?
I see myself being, like Leonard McCoy, an old country doctor. No, practicing in a little town, maybe in Appalachia, pardon me, and being the community provider. And I also see myself doing short-term medical outreach trips a couple times a year in other countries. I've been on 3 so far, and that's an interest I expect to continue. But what you're doing in rural medicine is very like what you're doing in global outreach, in that you're practicing in a lower resource setting with people that are perhaps a lot needier and not getting maybe not getting regular care. It's just a little more episodic, I guess. So I see myself doing that.
Well, folks, that is Kate. Again, she is or has an amazing story, deciding at 50 years old to go back to medical school. I think most people would run and hide under a rock if they decided to do that. Obviously, she's had a lot of family support and a lot of courage along the way. I wanted to have her on today to show that anything is possible and anybody can get into medical school. You just need to put in the work, put in the effort, and keep chugging along, and eventually you will get there. Whether you're straight out of undergrad or you're looking to change careers and making that leap into medicine, it can be done, and Kate demonstrates that. So that's Kate. Again, all the information that we talked about, you can find that at medicalschoolhq.net/session11. I'll have links to all the stuff we talked about, including the National Health Service Corps scholarship and everything else. I wanted to talk about a resource that I found recently online called 1 Minute Medical School. It's a great website that is a bunch of YouTube videos that are approximately 1 minute long, and it shows the creator writing on a whiteboard or a piece of paper, big piece of paper, about different aspects of medicine and medical school. So go check it out, 1minutemedicalschool.com. Again, I'll have that link in the show notes, medicalschoolhq.net/session11. As always, if you have any questions for us, feel free to call us at 617-410-6747, and you can give us some feedback over our voicemail line. I hope the information provided to you today will help better guide you on your path to becoming a physician. Make sure to join us next time here at the Medical School Headquarters.